All right, ranking member of the House Intelligence Committee, Congressman Devin Nunes, is now preparing to send 8 criminal referrals to the Attorney General, William Barr, over the alleged misconduct during the Trump-Russia investigation. Also, just breaking now, Devin Nunes has filed a $150 million lawsuit against McClatchy News and alleging conspiracy to derail the Clinton-Russia probes. Congressman joins us now at the very latest. Let's start with your lawsuit. Wasn't this the same McClatchy that said that Michael Cohen was in Prague? I knew where Michael Cohen was. His son is a great athlete. His son, he was in Los Angeles with his son, let's just say showing off his son's great talent. He never was in Prague, and they doubled down on stupid. But that's only one example.
They did that twice, Sean. So they had dozens and dozens of stories. So a couple of the reporters there were the biggest perpetrators of the Russia hoax. And don't forget, they also targeted the National Rifle Association. They targeted a lawyer, Cleta Mitchell. So all of this was done in concert while they were slandering and attacking me and defaming me, attacking Republicans. And the whole time they were getting this information from someone. And so part of the lawsuit here is not only that, they need to retract everything that they did against me, but they also need to come clean with the American people, retract all of their fake news stories. And so this is part of the broader cleanup. So remember a few weeks ago, I filed against Twitter that they're censoring conservatives. McClatchy is one of the biggest, the worst offenders of this, but we're coming after the rest of them. I think people are just beginning to wake up now that I'm serious. I'm coming to clean up all of the mess. So if you're out there and you lied and you defamed, we're going to come after you.
Well, I would add to the list, the cowardly Schiff. I've offered him an hour on the show, and I have a dossier on Schiff.
I can't sue him, but
I have him in his own words documented. I offered him 3 hours on radio and 1 hour here.
I don't know why he doesn't take it up, but he doesn't want to tell you. I guess he's afraid.
I got a tape of him colluding with a Russian, or somebody believed to be a Russian, that had compromising materials, naked pictures of Trump, and, he was hyperventilating on the phone call, didn't know it was a hoax.
And don't forget, even after that, the Democratic staff followed up. So the media ignored. That's another thing that they ignored. So there's two things that happened in this, right? You had fake news stories that were very slanderous that have got to be wiped away and cleaned off the internet. And at the same time, you had that they would take these stories and ignore them, like the fact that you had staffers here that were attempting to collude with Russians, Democratic staffers colluding with Russians, trying to get information on Donald Trump. I mean, that really happened, and it's went largely unreported, except by very few in the conservative media.
And we also had the Hillary bought and paid for dossier, real Russian collusion, paid for to influence the election. Now we've got evidence. The Ukrainian officials on them with evidence and a tape. Joe Biden bragging they fired him. I don't have a lot of time. I want to get to the criminal referral issue. I know you begin with 8, but there might be more. What can you tell us, and how soon?
Yeah, so simply put, there's 5 that are straightforward. So 5 on lying, leaking, obstructing Congress. Those are five specific names. There are 3. One is a global leak referral. So remember, there's been, everybody knows about the leak between General Flynn and the Russian ambassador. We don't know that that's ever been investigated, but there's about a dozen others. So we're referring all of those to make sure that they get the proper sunlight put on them and transparency so that they can be followed up on. The other 2, I think, are more difficult that involve conspiracy. I think there were a bunch of people who wanted to be the next Watergate deep throat within the FBI and DOJ, and they were leaking, and they were proud to do it, and they were all conspiring together, and that's what we're asking the DOJ to look into.
If we don't hold them accountable for this abuse of power, this corruption at the highest levels, to first influence and help one candidate over another, and then literally upend the election of the American people, it will happen again and again. We'll lose the republic. Holding them accountable is key. Thank you, Congressman. Chris Kobach is a former Secretary of State of the state of Kansas, and he joins us tonight. Mr. Kobach, thanks very much for coming on. Why is it so hard for the administration to enact the policies the president ran on?
Well, I think the biggest impediment, actually, Tucker, has been the Department of Homeland Security itself. Leadership at that agency for the past 2 years, ever since the president took office, has been unwilling to execute many of the president's plans. And I can say from direct personal experience, I have been in the room when the president has given express orders to leadership at DHS and been assured that, yes, those orders will be carried out, and then a year later, nothing has happened. So there has been deliberate foot dragging, and I think that's why you're seeing the White House take the necessary steps to clean house at DHS and put people in, hopefully, who will quickly execute what the president orders. I mean, it was the president who was elected, not the agency.
Of course.
And the agency needs to enact and move quickly to execute the president's objectives and policies. That has not been happening, and it's been really remarkable how badly the agency has been doing in executing what the president has asked.
Well, that's not just a hope. It's a constitutional requirement. All authority in the executive branch flows from the one guy who's elected by voters, who's the president. So if you're running DHS tomorrow, what would you do first?
First three things I would do to address this current problem on the border is, number one, we would publish the final version of the regulation that settles the Flores settlement. It supersedes the Flores settlement. Basically, it stipulates how the United States can detain an entire family unit together, so you wouldn't have separation of families, and you could detain them for as long as is necessary. That could be done tomorrow. Second thing is I would deploy the thousands of FEMA trailers either to border cities or to military bases in Texas and Arizona and set up processing centers. Instead of just turning loose these bogus asylum applicants onto the American streets never to be seen again, let's put them in mobile homes. Let's process their claims, ship the immigration judges in, have the claims processed right there. As soon as their claim is denied, put them on a passenger plane and fly them right back home. Word will get out in the villages back home. Hey, it doesn't work to get in these caravans anymore. You're not going to be released into the United States. And then the third thing that I would do is publish a regulation that tells Mexico in so many words, no, your illegal aliens in the United States cannot send remittances home anymore. You can't wire things through Western Union. We could do that with a Treasury regulation and then tell Mexico, look, that regulation is going to take effect and become final unless you sign a third country, safe third country agreement like we have with Canada, so that any asylum applicant has to, the first safe country they set foot in, namely Mexico, they have to apply there for asylum. They can't walk all the way through Mexico and then say, oh, we're applying for asylum here in the United States. I do those three things right away, keep building the wall, and then there's about 50 other executive actions.
But those three things that you just explained would take care of a huge percentage of the problem that we're seeing on television. So I mean, I hope whoever's running that does those things tomorrow. I can't resist asking you about Barack Obama's remarks from Berlin. He said it's not racist to ask people to learn the language of the country they're moving to or to encourage them to assimilate. If you want to hang together as a country, you have to do that. I wonder, how have things changed so much that obvious statement, which has been an article of faith for Americans since the country was founded, become hate speech?
You know, I think it's multiculturalism and political correctness has gone so far over the edge that now to even say anything that suggests to people who came to America because they like something about our country, to suggest to them, well, why don't you adopt the language of our country, and why don't you appreciate the United States Constitution? There's an idea. To suggest that is to be somehow racist or intolerant, and that's not true at all. It's simply to say, look, we want to be a country where we all agree with each other in principle. I mean, obviously we can disagree politically, but we want to have shared principles and shared language and to the extent possible, shared values. There's nothing wrong with that.
Well, it's
every
mandatory.
great nation has done that.
Of course, or the country falls apart. People are so afraid of being criticized by CNN that they won't, but they should. Chris Kobach, it's great to see you. Thank you for doing that. Democrats are finding it harder and harder to win the votes of ordinary American citizens. Instead, they have a new strategy: create a new voter pool. Let 16-year-olds vote, open the borders, and now give the vote even to violent criminals who are still behind bars. In Iowa on Saturday, Bernie Sanders argued that those who break America's laws still should be able to help make them.
In your home state of Vermont, that incarcerated people are allowed to vote.
Yes.
Would you commit to that idea? Would you commit to that on a nationwide scale?
I think that is absolutely the direction we should go.
Let incarcerated people vote. Keep in mind that plenty of prisons are located in rural areas. Most of them are, actually. It's perfectly possible that inmates could wind up running the town that holds them because they'd be the biggest voting bloc. Expect that to be a Democratic litmus test by the end of May. Author and columnist Mark Stein joins us tonight. Mark, the inmates should not just be running the asylum, but the town.
Yeah, the thing to remember about Bernie, Tucker, is he's actually the front runner because, to continue with your asylum analogy, in the land of the entirely deranged, the fitfully sane man is king. and Bernie is the proverbial stop clock. You just 10 minutes ago, you mentioned a burst of sanity on immigration, where he said we can't have open borders because all the world's poor will want to come here. He sounded as crazy as you, Tucker. He sounded as evil as you.
He sometimes does that, I know.
I know. I can't tell them apart, Bernie Carlson or Tucker Sanders. And then every so often, he just genuflects to the insanity of the base and the party. But he's actually much shrewder than Kamala Harris and Cory Booker and all the rest of it. And if he doesn't blow it like he did last time, he's actually going to be, as I said, the at least fitfully sane guy, the proverbial stopped clock in the Democrat field.
Can I ask you a question that's been bothering me? Why couldn't you have a candidate who was populist in economics, who wasn't, any kind of supply side or libertarian economics, but more conservative on the social issues, who was focused on the country rather than the rest of the world, who was pro-family? Those are not incompatible positions, are they?
Well, I'd say that's actually where the sweet spot in politics is. You remember, like 10, 15 years ago, we used to have these people like Christy Whitman and George Pataki, who were so-called fiscally conservative and socially liberal. And I'd say, actually, the sweet spot is probably to be fiscally liberal and culturally conservative. And that's where old school socialists like Bernie Sanders would have been quite comfortable being. Bernie's brother is like an old-school British Labour Party socialist. He's all about the workers, by which he means the British workers, not 6.5 billion other workers who want to move to you once you open the borders. I think that is actually the sweet spot.
I'd be very sympathetic to a candidate. I don't think they're smart enough to do that. So I got to ask you about this. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez started sporting a new accent while speaking at Al Sharpton's extremely tax-exempt conference last week. Watch.
The fight's been long, y'all. This is what organizing looks like.
That's right.
This is what building power looks like. I'm proud to be a bartender. Ain't nothing wrong with that.
Ocasio-Cortez says she's from the Bronx, and she's always spoken that way. She says it was code switching and that her normal day-to-day voice is the fake one. But she's not the first Democrat to discover a long-lost accent when speaking before an African-American audience. You'll remember. Watch.
I don't feel no ways tired. I come too far from where I started from. Nobody told me that the road would be easy.
Mark, if you patronized an audience that much, would you feel shame?
Well, look, in fairness, I'd say Hillary's terrible at it. Absolutely terrible. And Alexandria, if you're going to do it, you have to do it with, and I speak as a foreigner, so I can't tell the difference between Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez and William F. Buckley Jr. All you Americans sound the same to me. But Hillary can't do it. And actually, I think that gets to the heart of it. Alexandria can get away with it in a way that Hillary can't, because I think for Hillary and Joe Biden, when he was doing, they're going to put you all back in chains. I think those people are saying, I want to be something other than white. Take my whiteness away from me. I'm Indian, like Elizabeth Warren. I'm Hispanic, like Beto O'Rourke. Or I'm just whoever I'm standing in front of at the moment, like Hillary. And Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, whatever you say about her, is doing it with a much lighter touch
I think it's a fair
Hillary
point.
Clinton.
I wonder, though, we're roughly the same age. Didn't you grow up in a world where people were encouraged to be who you naturally are? When you were a kid, could you imagine living in a country where people are supposed to be ashamed of how they were born? I thought that was the opposite of what we wanted.
No, and I lived through a whole generation of stupid songs about being authentic. Whitney Houston, Learning to Love Yourself is the Greatest Love of All. Sammy Davis Jr., I Gotta Be Me. And all of a sudden, we have politicians who are actually trying to pretend to be. So Elizabeth Warren is Harvard Law School's first woman of color, and nobody laughs. That's the insanity. We laugh at it, but everyone who matters in America takes that nonsense perfectly seriously.
I mean, is it sustainable long term to tell people they should be ashamed of how they were born?
No, I don't think so. I think it's actually psychologically unhealthy. And I think that's what's interesting. For someone like Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, she's a young woman and like she's goofing around with that crowd. For Hillary, it actually says something appalling about our permanent political class, that they can be in front of us for 4 decades and still not know who they are.
I think it's really, I agree with that. It's really unhealthy, I think. Mark Stein, great to see you. Thank you for that.